This is Second Down on ESPN Radio, presented to you by The Uniform Source. Christian Gokel alongside PJ Zuko and Cam Ursery. Glad you guys are hanging out with us on this Tuesday afternoon. We have so much to dive into today. Today, the anniversary of a couple of very important milestones in college football history. I should say this week. This week is pretty significant in terms of college football history, obviously because of where it falls on the calendar, but a big week. And so I want to dive into a couple of the historic things that have happened that have kind of changed the landscape of college football. Obviously, we're going to talk some Georgia, Alabama. Stetson Bennett, he's got some things to say. So we're going to dive into that. Before we go any further, I did want to go back. This is completely on me. Just in the heat of all the conversations and all the things we wanted to talk about yesterday, completely forgot to bring it up. Want to bring up the passing of legendary Hall of Famer, former Atlanta Falcons coach, Super Bowl champion, Dan Reeves, who passed away, and just an unbelievable coach and a guy who I think if you just want to talk about football, the craziest stat about him is he participated as a coach or a player in 9 different Super Bowls throughout the years, coached and played with some of the legends of the game. I mean, he was a player coach for Tom Landry. So just an icon in American football history. We wanted to bring that up. From Rome, Georgia, played high school at Americus, Georgia, was a South Carolina Gamecock. So just born and bred in the Peach State and just a good Southern dude, and wishing his family nothing but peace and happiness as they have so many great memories to go back on and look. And just for me, growing up an Atlanta Falcons fan, Dan Reeves was the head coach. So thoughts and prayers to his family. We did want to bring that up, though. The legendary Dan Reeves passed away at age 77.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, just a historic man all around when it comes to football and when it comes to the state of Georgia, really the South. Just kind of had an impact on a lot of different things, and obviously a lot of different organizations. That's a term you don't hear a lot anymore. And as well, a player coach back in the day also. With some pretty important teams, and just being able to hit the milestones that he was able to. And I know even with someone like me, I grew up in the North. You guys are both, Georgia kids who grew up watching and rooting for the Falcons. Obviously, that was a big part of who Dan Reeves was. And so I kind of have an outsider's perspective, but still, as that outsider's perspective, a ton of respect for obviously what he was able to do. Not only in football, but outside of it as well. So certainly sad to hear of the passing. And like you said, good vibes and prayers to the family during this time.
Okay, but again, this week, a huge week in terms of the history of football. Yesterday, guys, was the 15-year anniversary of the.
No.
Yeah. 15 years ago, the arrival of Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah.
Literally that morning, he was still the head football coach of the Miami Dolphins.
I'm not going to coach Alabama. I'm not going to coach the Crimson Tide.
I mean, according to the story on ESPN.com, the AD came down, was staying at his house in Miami. He slept on what he said, and he's like, all right, I'll do it. And what's funny is I knew – so Rich Rodriguez was the guy they wanted, right? They wanted Rich Rod to come in and take over, but he goes and ends up spurning them to take the Michigan job, right? So they wanted Rich Rod to come to Tuscaloosa. He turns them down, and it was more like it's kind of like an 11th hour kind of a deal where everyone thought like he was already on campus in Tuscaloosa, but he takes the Michigan job, and then they actually – I didn't know this. They had offered the job to Steve Spurrier.
Wow. Yeah, no, I had no idea about that.
So they were trying to get him from South Carolina over to Alabama. And that which is what's funny is Steve Spurrier is still the last SEC East head coach to beat Alabama.
Right.
So that just so many layers in this. But he turns him down. And so Saban was, I don't want to say the third option, but I guess maybe became an option when they got turned down by those two guys. He became the top option for them. Maybe they didn't even consider him prior to that just because he was in the NFL. And even though I think he had gone like 6-10 the year before, Wayne Huizenga, the owner of the Dolphins, like still really believed in him. And he was slowly developing his brand of football down in Miami. And then it's just, I love the Saban story, right? Because we obviously know what he's done since he's taken over inside of college football, right? 6 national championships. Alabama hadn't had a Heisman winner. I don't know how many years before he got there, and now all of the ones that they've had since he's been there. But it had been a long time since they had a Heisman winner. Now it's like basically every single year it's an Alabama player up there in New York.
At least
right?
a finalist, yeah.
So, right. So it's just, what he's done is nothing short of the greatest coaching job in the history of college football over his tenure. He's the greatest coach in the history of college football. But at the same time, it came down to a decision from a doctor, and he could have had Drew Brees in Miami. And how could that have changed the NFL and the trajectory of not only the NFL, but of college football? If Nick Saban gets Drew Brees and they're winning football games, and he's like, I got Drew Brees and I live in Miami, which, I mean, is a hard thing to go away from. Not taking anything away from Tuscaloosa, but Miami's Miami, right? So it's just, how could the history of college football change? I think yesterday, January 3rd, a pretty significant day, not just in college football history, but it's in football history in general, because Drew Brees very easily, we could not have seen him with Sean Payton and all those records that they set in the Super Bowl. And it's just, it's amazing how just a couple of decisions shake out the butterfly effect of that, and where we're sitting right now.
Yeah, he's been haunting me to this day. I guess you could say that, because if Nick Saban doesn't go to Tuscaloosa, how many, national championships does Georgia have? 2, maybe 3 at least. But I mean, I think it's also a good thing, because I mean, he came to the SEC and he's kind of put the SEC on notice as far as like the dominance in college football per se. I mean, I know Florida's won a couple and Auburn's won one, LSU won one, but we know Bama's been dominating pretty much forever for basically half of my life.
I think Nick Saban not only changed the SEC, but I think he kind of changed college football in that it used to be very much of a, I don't want to say a regionalized sport, because obviously TV and the internet has really changed that. But when it came to recruiting, I mean, PJ, you're a Big Ten fan. A majority of Ohio State's players were from Ohio, and Pennsylvania got a majority of their players from Pennsylvania and surrounding states, right? Georgia, a majority of their players were from Georgia. Florida, going to South Carolina, pick a guy out, stuff like that. Nick Saban came in and he turned college football into an arms race, right? Not just in recruiting, because he did that. One of my favorite, this is a piece on ESPN.com right now on the front page by Alex Scarborough. But he came in and he was, as of that morning, he was still an NFL head coach.
Right.
And he comes in, and the recruiting coordinator and the staff is kind of sitting in a room as he's walking in and touring the facility after they got his wife, Terry, and everybody else settled in. He's touring the facility. He walks up to the big board, and he's looking at the big board. He goes, hey, where are we at with this guy? And he's pointing at Rolando McClain. And he's like pointing at these different guys, and they're all there like, oh, okay, this guy's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Right. He knows about these kids who are like, this is a high school senior, Rolando McClain, that he's like, hey, when's the last time somebody called this guy?
Right.
Kind of a thing. So he came in and he turned college football into an arms race, not just in recruiting, but also with facilities. Because the Bryant Denny Stadium that he was walking around in is not the same one that we're looking at right now.
Yeah.
Right. And he's turned that into just the Death Star of college football. And then the actual the weight rooms that they have there and the locker rooms that they have there. One of the first things they said is he came in and he said, I want the meeting rooms on the same level as the locker room to make it more convenient for the players. So they're not having to walk and spend extra time going to these meeting rooms. They can walk out of the locker room right into a meeting room. So it's just, and the money and the investment that Alabama gave him, think about who was on his staffs all of those years in Tuscaloosa, right? You're looking at one of them in Athens that he's about to play again in a national championship. Kirby Smart's in there, and he's taking all of that stuff in and saying, okay, if we're going to do this right, we have to have the facilities that can keep up with it. And if you look at Georgia, from when Kirby Smart got there to where they are now, completely different.
Yeah.
All the indoor practice facility that they have, the new facilities that they're building right now, the upgrades that they've done to the Buttsmere building, it's become an arms race inside of college football. And if you're going to get the recruits, I mean, LSU, they win the national championship. I think the very next year they have just a spaceship of a locker room, right? It's just, you can never be satisfied. Right. And that, I think, a lot of it is credited to Nick Saban.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you talk about him revamping that like that is just insane. And thinking about it too, I mean, you talk about him going in automatically looking at recruiting boards and pointing at this guy, Rolando McClain, and saying, where's he at? Yeah. But remember, just a few years before that, he's head coach, winning national championships there with LSU. Yep. So it's interesting to see the progression of Nick Saban as well, of, going in, winning that national championship with LSU, going to the NFL, that whole time possibly thinking, yeah, everyone has their backup plans. Everyone's like, well, if this doesn't work out, what would I do differently when I go back? Well, it seemed like he was thinking of ways to do things differently, or at least renovate how he was doing things, even after coming out of a national championship. And while he was in the pros, well, if I ever go back to college football, this is kind of what I want to do. And boom, automatically puts it into action. And no, for sure, it's been obviously remarkable to see what they've been able to do. And now, what do you think of, like, with every single head football coach that takes over? I know, as a fan of a team that has a quote unquote great recruiter as their head coach, always talking about facilities, always talking about needing better this, better that, to get those recruits in there and make things more efficient for the players. So not a big surprise that he was talking about that, but more of a surprise to hear, man, that was Nick Saban. That came from him. And you look at the trickle down effect of, boom, he starts winning national championships. Now what's every coach talking about, and what's every coach focusing on? Imagine that, the same thing that he was.
Yeah, the Saban blueprint has been tried to be copied multiple times. Like I said, I don't think you have to look any further than Athens. Like, obviously you wanted to bring Kirby Smart in because he's a former all SEC Georgia Bulldog, right? From his safety spot back in the 90s. So you had the alma mater thing, highly successful defensive coordinator with a highly successful team. But make no mistake about it, when they bring Kirby Smart in, it's because they wanted to make Georgia Tuscaloosa East, right? And I think he's done about as good of a job as you could have emulating what Alabama has done. And there's a reason we are now seeing both of these teams match up in the national championship again, and both of them have dominated their side of the conference. And again, it's college football. There's 130 FBS teams, and those are the two teams playing for the national championship right now. So Nick Saban just completely shifted the way these head coaches operate. I don't want to go back. I was correct. I doubted myself again. Alabama did not have a Heisman winner before Nick Saban got there.
Yeah, man. But I was kind of on the same.
Yeah, Mark Ingram was the first ever Heisman winner for Alabama.
He's blessed us with a lot of NFL players. I want to say
he's blessed the NFL.
Yeah, I want to say every team. I would love to notice that, like, every team has to at least have one Alabama player on that roster. Probably, but I mean some of the time,
or really close to that.
Right.
Yeah, really close.
You have some teams that just love drafting certain players, like the Giants love drafting Georgia players, and the Jaguars love Florida players. So
there was a time when Bill Belichick was getting incredible production out of players from Rutgers, which like, it seemed like every year he was getting someone from.
I can't wait for Stetson Bennett to be like a kick returner, wide receiver. For the Patriots.
Right. No, for sure. But think about that though. I think people overlook too the production and getting players ready for the NFL. It's a whole lot different. Like, it's not just this factory where, oh, this kid's is a top 100, top 150 player in high school in the nation. He's going to go to a college and he's automatically going to be an NFL player as well. No, like, seeing Alabama churn out so many high quality NFL players, and I say that, but not college football players, NFL players, is a statement to what they do in producing in the word is slipping my mind, but developing them and getting them ready. Because sure, there's
I'm with you.
Plenty of programs
I'm with you on this, but I think Kirby Smart kind of said it. You can't out-coach talent. You can't out-coach recruiting. I think Nick Saban does a vast majority of his job just getting the players on campus. If you can get 100 of the top 5% of the players in the country, you're gonna put out 8 or 9 NFL guys every single year. I'm not saying Nick Saban doesn't do an amazing job of developing players and sending them to the NFL. I'm just saying I don't inherently know that Bill O'Brien and Doug Marrone and the guys that are on the Alabama coach and Pete Golding are that much better of football coaches and developmental guys than any other Power Five or Luke Fickell. Like, I mean, I would say what Luke Fickell has done in terms of developing, he's going to put 3 guys in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft at Cincinnati. I'd say that's more impressive than Alabama having 9 players, right? Because it's just what Nick Saban does is he goes, I'm just going to take the best of everything. Like me, Georgia, Texas A&M, and Ohio State are just going to split up everything between the 4 of us, and then everybody else can have everything else, right? It's easier to put the talent in the NFL when you're doing that.
Yeah, because there's some colleges that have, like, you know, a couple of players in the NFL that are good, but Alabama has like 10 wide receivers that are good.
That's nuts.
And like
Yeah.
Like literally 10 wide receivers that are good, not counting any other position. It's just he gets talent
Like
and
top of your head.
it's crazy.
I'm just
Julio-
saying that
Julio Jones.
there's a good reason
Yeah.
why. Also, you got to think of like the longevity of them. There's a good reason why there's not a whole lot of Alabama players that and I get you with the talent thing for sure. They're getting the best talent in there and talent produces, but at the same time, there's not a whole lot of Alabama players that go in the league and bust after 1 or 2 years. And
No.
look at the other top programs. They're
There sure used to be like the running
There
thing used to
are.
be like you
Trent
didn't want to draft
Richardson.
Alabama DBs.
right.
Kind of running backs too.
That's
Like I
changed.
know Trent
Yeah.
Richardson wasn't. He was a very big miss. Eddie Lacy was okay for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Mark
I don't know.
Ingram's the one solid one
I
where
feel
you
like
can hold on
Richardson's
to.
kind of an outlier, but like Eddie Lacy,
Kenyon Drake.
Eddie Lacy had like a couple really.
Yeah, he
productive
had
we
some
all know
years.
what
He had
his
some really good
problem was
years.
though, and it wasn't like
Listen,
it wasn't
listen.
anything on the football
Okay,
field.
maybe not Cam, but this show we are not one to talk about.
I'm not trying to.
Oh,
I'm
I
just-
will
I'm
talk
just-
about you now.
No, but you
Just
can't talk
saying.
about that. Only thick boys can talk about thick boys like that.
Kenyon Drake, but I mean, wide
He had a
receivers.
couple of really. Oh my god!
Mhm.
Like top of your head, like how many Alabama wide receivers can you name right now in the NFL that are dominating? You have Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley,
Amari
Devonta Smith,
Cooper.
Jalen Waddle, Amari Cooper. I mean,
Jerry Judy is hurt.
Jerry
I
Judy,
think.
but I still,
Oh,
Jerry
yeah,
Jeudy's out
Jalen
there.
Waddle's going crazy
yeah, out
before.
there doing it. So I mean,
Yeah,
it's nuts.
topics like that kind of like it floods my mind. So it's like there's
Yeah.
so many I can't even like
two
keep
more
track of
coming into the league. now.
Correct. Like Jameson Williams and John Mechie will absolutely be in the league.
They have more wide receivers than some teams have. Like just all position players in the NFL right now. It's insane.
No, it's nuts. But again, as of yesterday, 15 years ago, Nick Saban arrives in Tuscaloosa and just completely changes the landscape of football, not just in college. I'll say not just in the NFL either, just football in general. The way we look at high school football now, as important as recruiting has become, Nick Saban and the emphasis and just I don't know if drive is a strong enough word for the amount of emphasis he put behind recruiting. The way he addressed it just completely changed football in general. And now it's filtering down into the middle school. I was watching a dang TikTok of an 8th grader that has offers from like Georgia Tech and Miami, right? So it's nuts, but it's football now, baby, in 2022. We got more to come. Got another anniversary to talk about. The guys kind of spoiled it there, but we'll get back to it. This is Second Down on ESPN Radio. Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. Christian Gokel alongside PJ Zuko and Cam Urshery here. Glad to have you hanging out on this Tuesday afternoon. All right, so you guys kind of spoiled it in the last segment, but we're going to go back to it. 16 years ago today, in my mind, I think this is fact, the greatest college football game of all time was played.
Absolutely.
In
Yes.
Pasadena, California, between the USC Trojans, who a lot of people at the time considered to be maybe the best team ever, versus what Ben lovingly refers to as VY the Legend, Vince Young, and the Texas Longhorns. I mean, just the stage, right? You had USC coming in on a historic win streak. Texas was undefeated coming into this game as well. They had beaten Michigan in the Rose Bowl the year before. I think that's initially when we got the "we'll be back" kind of a thing, like the Terminator thing from Vince Young. He's like, "We'll be back here next year."
Yeah.
Like, don't worry about it. And so you had this huge buildup to this game. And then just the setting itself, right? You're in the Rose Bowl, which in my mind is the greatest stage in sports in America. I don't know if that's arguable. Maybe Madison Square Garden. I think you
No.
could. I think you. But I mean, if you're talking about just like, if you're talking about just like the pinnacle of their sport
Yeah.
in America, because
Rose
it
Bowl.
used to be Yankee Stadium,
Mhm.
but they tore it down,
Right.
and now they have new Yankee Stadium. Like, I can't think of a more Lambeau Field, maybe.
Yeah, but even then,
But Lambeau Field is typically frigid, and when it's not frigid, it's just
yeah,
kind of Green Bay.
right.
And nothing against Green Bay, but that ain't Pasadena.
What's like to me, like there's so many other different places that are great historic stadiums, but then you think about the event that actually happens in them, and I
Yeah.
think that's what sets the Rose Bowl apart. Like it's a great historic, amazing stadium with a great backdrop and all the tradition and all that, and then you have the national championship there, the Rose Bowl there. I mean, it just adds another layer than could possibly be at like, Lambeau Field in the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers. Like that's great. That's amazing. But the Rose Bowl, dude, I mean, that's different.
And so we all obviously know what happens in this game, right? Texas wins the game 41-38. Vince Young has like an absurd game, almost 500 yards in the game, 200 yards rushing,
Yeah.
runs in that final one where USC is just like defeated,
Mhm.
right? You have Matthew McConaughey on the Texas sideline, Will Ferrell, like both, and this is like the peak of both of these guys' powers, right? Matthew McConaughey's on the Texas sideline, Will Ferrell is on the USC sideline, walk around, plenty of other celebrities as well. Just a massive amount of NFL talent. This is actually the first game, and I don't know if it still is. It's the first game in college football history to have two Heisman Trophy winners playing for the same team, because you had Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Crazy.
Reggie had to give his Heisman
Yeah.
back. I don't know. Has that happened since? I'm trying to
Mm,
think. I don't think
For
so.
the
Like
same
Alabama would be
team,
the only school that maybe
yeah.
could have done it, and they didn't.
No, Percy Harvin didn't win a Heisman. No,
Should've.
he didn't.
Should have.
He should have, but nah, he didn't win a Heisman, man. I used to love Reggie Bush. So
what happened? You can still love Reggie Bush.
I
still
know
love
what
Reggie
happened.
Yeah.
Reggie Bush wasn't great running inside the tackles. He's never really been great
You
running
don't
inside the
need to be
tackle.
great running inside the tackle.
Yeah, if
when
you're Reggie Bush. I just don't. Vince Young played out his mind. I'm going to say that because that was probably the year I started watching college football, and that's really when Reggie Bush came.
How
on
old
the
were you
scene.
when this game was played?
06. I was 8.
There you go.
I was 8 years old. Well, actually, technically, I was 7 because my birthday's in April.
Yeah.
So I was 7 years old, and I used to love Reggie Bush and him and Matt Leinart and that team. What they had, Brian Cushing on defense.
Oh yeah, and
Ray Maluga.
Man, yeah.
you guys want to do
Lord.
that? You guys
Lord
just
have
want to do
mercy.
that?
That's
Lord.
a pull right there, man. That's
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday because
Yeah.
this is the greatest game I've ever seen, and I love Vince Young too.
I think
You
part
gotta
of
love
yeah.
Vince Young.
Not everyone, but like I feel like a lot of people like
Kevin Ellison, Reggie Bush, backup quarterback Mark Sanchez, Dwayne Jarrett,
Wow.
John David Booty. What's good, my guy? Brian Cushing, Matt Leinart. Yeah, I mean, this team is just nuts.
Man.
Lindell White, get at him.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Lindell, big old Lindell, got stuffed on that. What is it? 4th and 2.
But I mean, he
Still
was a
had
better
it.
running back in the game than Reggie.
Yeah, than
He was a
Reggie
better. He was a
Bush.
better one.
Yeah,
Well,
he
I know
was.
that was the debate, right? Like, who do you put in? And everyone's like, well, you have a Heisman
Keith
winner.
Rivers, let's go.
You have a Heisman winner on your bench right now, and you're not giving him the rock
Yeah.
on 4th and
Yeah.
2. It's like, not only that, but it's Lendell White was the heavy setback. Like, he
Yeah.
was the power backup. I mean, that's
Raymond
kind of what
Luga.
you would expect on 4th and 2s.
Can we say like maybe the best NFL career out of the USC Trojans? Ryan Khalil.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
Yeah.
probably.
I know Cushing was decent for a couple of years in Houston. I didn't hear much from
Falcons
Luka.
all-time draft pick Sam Baker.
Oh Lord, yeah, yeah, that didn't turn out well.
That's
Man.
I don't know.
painful.
There,
Those were
there
good
were there
days.
were a few players that from
Frosty
that team,
Rucker, let's go.
yeah, like you said, that like didn't have incredible NFL careers,
Mhm.
but that I think like it's the difference between what you expect from them and what they actually do.
Yeah.
Like hanging around the NFL for 7-8 years is nothing to be scoffed at.
Mm-mm.
Like,
And I
Uh,
think Vince Young would have had a better NFL career if it wasn't, his.
Yeah,
I
you
just
gonna
not.
look, you gonna look Ben Troop in the eyes and say the Tennessee Titans were the reason?
No. I'm not a huge fan of Jeff Fisher.
I
I
don't think
just
a lot of people are.
Jared
Yeah,
Goff,
there you
messed up Jared Goff,
Yeah.
who is decent to me, but Vince Young, he still won Rookie of the Year, and you look at his stats. I mean, still pretty good for his career. So
Yeah.
love Vince Young, but Reggie Bush was that dude. Always will be that dude. I don't care.
Yeah, Jeff
That
Fisher
was-
was Mr. 9-7, 7-9.
it's just historically right in that
Yeah.
in that frame. But
But here's where I'm at with this Rose Bowl, because I think it's one of those things like where we all just like in our minds with like, what's the greatest college football game ever played? Like 2006 Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
Right. Sure, 2005 champion, but 2006 Rose Bowl. Right. It's like that's just like greatest game ever played. Yeah, 2006 Rose Bowl. Like no quite. Like at least to me, it's the first thing that pops in my mind. But it's like, okay, but why? And then you're like, well, Vince Young, Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, Lindell, all these guys. It's like, okay, but why is it the greatest? And I think it's the scene. And I think this does a really good job of summing it up. There's so many different things that happen inside of that. So for us growing up, the voice of college football, it was Brent Musburger and it was Keith Jackson.
mhm.
Like now it's Reese Davis and Kirk Herbstreit. And Vern Lundquist is certainly up there, even though he doesn't do it anymore. And Brad Nessler and those guys. But I mean, it was Keith Jackson and Brent Musburger. Like those were the two dudes, right? And this is Keith Jackson's last game. It was the last game that was technically known as ABC Sports before it became, and because it's all owned by Disney, but before it became ESPN on ABC.
Mhm.
So this was the final ABC Sports production where it still had that ABC logo popping up there next to the Rose Bowl, right? So that's the final one of those you got. It was the final game where the BCS National Championship wasn't a standalone game.
Right.
It's like back when it still rotated between the 4 BCS games, right? And then the year after that, it becomes its own standalone game, and then you have the 4 BCS games. So there's just so many different things inside of there where it's just kind of a transition period inside of college football. But then you just have this game where Vince Young just elevates to another level, and like people just hadn't seen that before.
Yeah.
Like you had seen Michael Vick in a national championship and what he was doing in the NFL, but just to watch a guy against a team that a lot of people thought were like the greatest ever. Like this USC team was on that Mount Rushmore with like the 2001 Miami Dolphins, the 95 Nebraska Cornhuskers, right? Like those teams. This is where that USC team was, and they couldn't touch Vince Young.
Mhm. Yeah.
I just think that's what's so awesome. So you had all of this pomp and circumstance around it, and then like you have the ferocious attempt from USC to win that football game, and then it's just Vince Young is just like Jordan in the finals. Like you couldn't touch him.
It's like if you put out like it's like if you put out like 2011 Alabama's defense, it was just absolutely nastier,
Right.
and they just couldn't stop anybody. They couldn't stop that one guy. That's what that game was. And yeah, I think too, people think about that one play, and it's easy to just look at that one play from Vince Young and be like, man, that was nasty. 4th and 5, last chance, clock running down. But yeah, you got to extrapolate that out to I think just the last 5 minutes of the ball game. Go back. That's just classic football. I could
Yeah.
watch that every day.
That's the point I was
over
gonna
and
make, is
over
I
for the
think
rest
this
of
is
my
also
life.
why it's the greatest ever. Is it was played 16 years ago, and like go back and try to watch like an NFL game from 16 years ago, or like a lot of other college football games. It's like you're kind of like, all right,
Mhm.
like it is what it is. This game you could watch it today. You can watch it 20
Mhm.
years from now. You could watch it 50 years from now, and it's still awesome.
It was
Yeah.
ahead of his time.
It's
Yeah,
incredible.
it definitely was.
Just that like again that like 5 minute span. I mean, they're down by 2 possessions,
Mhm.
man, and just Vince Young says, "Get on my back."
18
Well,
points in the fourth quarter.
he says, "Get on my back and let's do this." But then the defense shows up too. I mean, it's just
Correct me if I'm wrong. USC wins that. That's their third straight natty, right? They shared one a couple of years before that. They won one, and this would have been the third straight one. Am I right or wrong?
2-time defending AP national championship, the USC Trojans. So yeah, you're correct.
Wow. Yeah. See, man, I was
Because of
hurt.
what, 2004 or 2005 was the year Auburn went undefeated, and they got left out
it was 2004.
That I
I
don't know.
think.
with Jason Campbell and Cadillac and Ronnie Brown and them boys.
Yeah,
Man,
believe so.
USC
Yeah.
lost, man. That hurt because I was a Bush fan. I was. I was. I'm not gonna lie and come on here and say, "Oh, Vince Young." I like Vince Young, but I was definitely a Bush fan. You could see the hurt in Pete Carroll's eyes when they lost that game.
See, that was one
Especially
of
on
those
that
games.
4th
Like
and
usually,
5.
I find myself like rooting for one team in a game, but that's just one of those games I remember watching. And it's just like you just kind of sit back and watch. It's like watching a movie.
Yeah. It was like however this ends up, I'm gonna be perfectly fine with it because it's just this is classic and legit college football at its finest. I was rooting for Texas. I'll say I was rooting for Texas,
say
of course,
it.
but like at the same time, that's
That's
pretty
okay,
predictable
PJ.
for me.
PJ is making just revelations out here.
Okay, all right, that's pretty predictable for me though. Like any team that's going on and winning 1 or 2 straight things, like I want to see the underdog.
What's
Come
some
back and-
players from that Texas team outside of Vince Young?
Yeah, 2004 Auburn, 13-0.
What's some good players from that Texas team outside of Vince?
You mean like
Young? I
Michael
can't-
Huff?
There you go.
Oh, okay.
There you
Okay.
go.
I mean, gotta refresh the memory. It's been 16 years. I was
No,
a
they had
7-year-old kid.
who's running back for that team? Was that Jamal Charles at that point, or was he a little later?
I think Jamal Charles may have been a little bit later, or if it was Jamal Charles, he had to be like a freshman. I want to
I
say that
think
was a
he
little bit
was
later.
on that team. I got it pulled up right here.
I'm
We
pretty
could-
sure they had a
Jamal
really good
Charles.
running back.
Love Jamal Charles, man.
I'm
Or I'm
trying
just
to. Was
completely
it Brinson
terribly
that was the
forgetting.
running back on that team? Now you guys are killing me right here.
Because that was a good game, man.
They did have a player apparently on that roster who was a 6'3", 270-pound running back named Henry Melton.
Good lord,
Goodness gracious,
Why didn't he play more?
baby TJ Deckett.
right? He's like, no, he's the he was a counterpoint to
Man,
Lindell
Cam with
White.
the TJ Duckett reference. I
Oh,
appreciate
yeah.
Oh,
that.
my goodness.
Oh,
They had
yeah.
Selvin Young. That was that guy.
Yeah.
VY the legend. No, let's just go through it because I mean, yeah, this is awesome. You had Justin Blaylock on that team who played for the Falcons
Okay.
for forever. Will
Yeah.
Buchanan, the backup quarterback. Oh, there's so many good players on here. Jamal Charles, there he is. Yep,
Oh, what
Freshman.
year was he? Freshman.
freshman.
Yeah.
But he still
yeah.
got that ring.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
he
of
got
course.
that ring. Oh, that's OG.
Jermichael
right there.
Finley,
Oh,
get at me.
okay, nasty. Was Lima Swede on that team, or was
Cedric Griffin.
that a little bit after?
Cedric
as well?
Griffin was on that team. You had all the Griffins. You had Cedric Griffin, Dallas Griffin, Marcus Griffin, and Michael Griffin.
So that
There you go.
means did Jamal Charles play in 2 natties? Was he on that national championship team when Texas played Alabama as well?
In 2009.
What was 06? It was
Nine?
09.
No,
He
because
had to be a senior. if
junior or
that-
senior year?
freshman.
Yeah.
6, 7, 8. Yeah, no.
Okay. Just wondering.
Well, it's 2009 national championship, so it was a 2008 season. So he might have been a senior, but he also might have left early.
May have been
Was
a
it, or was
senior.
that game played in 2010?
Man,
Welcome.
It may have been played in 2010. I might be wrong.
that always confuses
These
me.
are my
I don't
favorite
know.
shows because this is just a show like where we are just sitting around on benches going like, no.
Right. It was like this year. They'll be like, hey, it's 2022 national championship. Like, no, it's not. It's 2021. But yeah, but it's played in
Well,
20
we'll let Cam look that up.
It
We
was
gotta take-
it was definitely 09 to 10. So
Yeah.
nah, he wasn't on that
he was
team.
not,
Gotcha, okay.
unless he got like a red shirt in there somewhere, but I'm pretty sure he was already cooking people for the Chiefs at that point. So we got to take a quick break. We'll come back. We got more to come here on Second Down, but I want to just wax nostalgically about that Rose Bowl. I'm going to do it any chance I can. Like I said, I will fight you any day of the week about Cam Newton's season at Auburn, and I'll talk to you at any point, anytime, anywhere about that Rose Bowl. We got more to come here on Second Down. We'll be right back after this. Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. 2 different locations in Savannah to take care of all of your uniform needs. All right, I'm going to go full BJ Bennett on you guys because this is going to be thought-provoking. There's going to be a lot of opinions here, and words mean things. I don't know. It's not really that deep. Cooper Kupp plays wide receiver for the Los Angeles Rams, and he's having an unbelievable season. He's only one of 4 players in NFL history with 100 receptions, 1,500 receiving yards, and 15 receiving touchdowns. The dude is an unbelievable wide receiver. And, you know, it's nice to see our guy, Matt Stafford, get a little bit better weather and get a little bit better team
Absolutely
out there. But I don't want to say made a controversial statement, but I think one that not a lot of people thought maybe him being the person he's talking about would be on that side of it.
Mm-hmm.
He came out and said he is in favor of separating records from 7 or 17 game seasons versus the 16 game seasons. For those of you out there who aren't familiar, he is within 11 catches of tying Michael Thomas for the most catches in a season, and he is 135 yards away from tying Calvin Johnson's single season receiving yardage record. Point of the story is Cooper Kupp has already played 16 games. Right. So if this was any other year, his regular season would be over, and he'd be those 11 receptions and 135 yards short. So in his mind, if he breaks it, those should be either with an asterisk, or it should just be a completely separate record book. He's not the only one who's getting close. I think TJ Watt is like a sack away, like 1 sack away from tying Michael Strahan for the record. And I know it hasn't really been a big deal in football because 16 games have been around for such a long time, but was it Roger Maris that broke the home run record? Yeah, Roger Maris, who broke the home run record prior to McGuire and Barry Bonds going back and forth, it was the 140 games prior to the 162 games. And so everyone's like, it doesn't count because you get so many more games to do it. I'm kind of with Cooper Kupp on this. I don't think it'd be that big of a deal to go back, or maybe just change it to you average it out like versus like games played in a season, and that's the record or something like that. Because if you're going to keep adding games, obviously the statistics are just going to keep getting higher.
This is what I would say. Typically I would agree, but I'm like, it's a COVID kind of year where things have been up and down. People are out of the lineup. 1 week you might not play with your starting quarterback or your starting O-lineman, and that's why I don't think that's why they added an extra game, but I think it's beneficial. But he's going to be one of 3 players to be a Triple Crown. My man, Steve Smith, and I think Jerry Rice are the other 2. I mean,
I'm not taking anything away from the season, but it's like, is it fair for Calvin Johnson, who played in 16 games? And I will say this, one of the best abilities is availability. And when you look back on records and games played, I don't think you can look at COVID any differently than you could look at turf toe or a rolled ankle or something like that. It's just in terms of reason for missing games.
Oh, that's true.
Whether or not you played, it's the NFL. It's a physical sport. People miss games all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think a big reason is if you, at least according to the NFL, the CDC and all of them, if you do everything you're supposed to do and you stay away from people that you're supposed to stay away from, then you shouldn't get COVID, and therefore you wouldn't be missing those games. So I don't know if I would put that asterisk next to it saying, oh, he did all of this and in a COVID year.
Yeah, I think they do need to set records aside and maybe possibly, hey, this is 17 game record. This is 16. Yeah. I think that's kind of cool because, I mean, what Calvin Johnson and Michael Thomas did, that's insane for just 16 games.
I don't know. I'm conflicted on it because I just if we do this for everything, if we do this for every sport, like sports evolve. It's just that sports change. The games amount of games being played, things like that change. There's more. You look at college football. There's more college bowl games and things like that nowadays too. And I know there's that conversation between, well, this is back when they only counted regular season games for college football players. This is when they added in bowl games. And I think, I don't know. I think it's kind of up to. It's interesting. I don't know if I'd have 2 different record books is basically what I'm trying to say. Like,
what I'm saying is, like, if you're the NFL and Calvin Johnson has this record, but Cooper Kupp breaks it by a yard, but he does it in a 17th game, could you then just go back and say, okay, we're going to put like the NFL single season receiving record is by game. So like because it's a 16 game season versus 17 game season, Calvin Johnson would still have a higher average per game. Could you still have Calvin Johnson as the record? Because I think that carries
wild,
I think that carries significance.
For sure. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's difficult. Like I could definitely see where y'all are come from and agree to a certain point, for sure. And if they're gonna do it, obviously this is the time to do it. Like this is the year to do it. You can't retroactively go back and do whatever. But
well, they're not going to. Nobody cares enough about it. It's like my argument that I always have against the College Football Hall of Fame is your one job in life as the College Football Hall of Fame is to be the bastion of information and history for college football, but you decide you don't want to do as much work, and so you put these just baseless kind of bumpers on yourself or framework on yourself, a criteria of what it takes to be even considered to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. And so guys like Howard Schnellenberger and Nick Chubb will never be able to be considered to be College Football Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
So it's just if you were the NFL record keepers, what else are you doing? Like this should be all you're worried about.
Right.
Do you
keeping track of this stuff.
Yeah.
Do you guys think he'll break it though?
11,
I know
11 for 135 is a lot.
Yeah, I don't think they will because they're like 0
unless
and
6. Unless they just force feed him.
Yeah,
Well,
they're 0 and 6 against San Francisco too.
Yeah.
I mean,
they are.
They haven't beat them in a while.
He is. I mean, he is obviously one of the core players on that team, and one of the core receivers. Like Matt Stafford, that's kind of his safety net. So at the end of the day, I think he could break the 11.
Yeah.
I don't think the 135 is going to happen, but I think he
Unless
could
you just
very well break the
rips
11.
off like a 70-yarder to start the game, and then you're like,
Right.
Speaking of records,
Yeah.
What Kyle Pitts is like 56 yards away from breaking
Pull
Mike.
that hammy though.
Do you think he's going to get back? Well,
I
listen,
hope.
we're talking to D Orlando at 335. We'll get the latest on that, but Kyle Pitts is like within striking distance of Mike Ditka's NFL rookie receiving record for a tight end. We'll talk to D Orlando about that. But quickly before we go to break, just want to leave you guys with this. We're talking about Calvin Johnson having the single season receiving yardage record. We're talking about Cooper Kupp trying to break that. You know what's pretty amazing about that? Same guy slinging both of them the ball.
True.
Matt Stafford out here doing it. We'll be right back right here on Second Down. Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. 2 different locations in Savannah to take care of all of your uniform needs. You got a big show coming up today on 3 and Out. We'll catch up with D. Orlando Ledbetter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Get the latest on the Atlanta Falcons. Could we see Kyle Pitts go for the record? You're not playing for anything else. You lost to the Bills. Matt Ryan just flexing on folks, getting unsportsmanlike conduct penalties and backing you up 15 yards and perhaps costing you the game. But we're not talking about that because I will never speak ill of my QB1, Matt Ryan. But again, we'll get the latest from D. Orlando Ledbetter. Also going to catch up with Drew DeArmond, excuse me.
That's tough. Yeah, following those two up. Yeah. I would have done worse.
Honestly. We're almost done. And we're going to get there. But Drew DeArmond from 977 ESPN in Huntsville. We're going to break down that Georgia-Alabama national championship coming up on Monday. We'll also catch up with Connor Riley for the Georgia perspective on that. Stetson Bennett out here saying, I ain't worried about 41 years of history. I'm worried about one game.
Woo!
Stetson, I have seen the pictures of you in the Georgia jersey growing up. I know damn well you're worried about 41 years of history. But we'll break all that down coming up on 3 and Out. If you missed any portion of our show today, you can check it out on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to Second Down. We will talk with everyone tomorrow.